So tonight we're going to work on merging, talk about merges. Now I'm not going to take I'm not going to take time actually going through the merging tool itself. I think most of us are familiar with that. I want to talk more about philosophies and ideas and ways to organize your thinking towards whether a merge should be done or not and that sort of thing rather than what things you click on to do the merge itself. So I think most of us are familiar with the merge tool itself as far as that goes. So we learned a long time ago that there's a lot of duplicates out there and they just never seem to go away. And so since the goal for trees is to have one and only one record for each person, we've got to learn to merge and try to be smart when we merge. So this presentation is going to focus on tips on showing how to judge if two records are really duplicates, and then walk you through some merge situations, show you some ideas for best practices, hopefully, and try to help you get a better handle on what to do when you get faced with a merge situation. And since there's no two merges that are alike, there's no way to have a real simple answer for how do I approach this because every situation is unique. What I've done is I've tried to figure out how could you analyze this so that it makes sense. And I finally decided there were four things you need to consider when you're doing a merge. And these things all need to be considered. One is the names of people. And we'll talk about the positive and negative about names. Another's the dates. Another's the places. And the fourth one's relationships. And of the four, in the end, relationships probably is the one that should carry the heavier weight unless there's no relationships to show. But in most cases, that's the thing that's kind of the final decision on things. And we'll talk about that and you'll see that tonight. Okay, so let's look at those four individually. Names, given names. You've got to beware. People use nicknames. Sometimes they go by their middle names instead of the first names. And if you have a person, they've got 10 documents, you might have 3 or 4 different ways their name is written. And so you've got to be careful. And people like to just change them in the old days. My great grandmother was that way. She was born Elizabeth Jane. And in 1870, she decided to be Jenny Elizabeth. And in those days, you didn't have to go through any court records. You just started calling yourself something else. Surnames. For women, it's especially tricky because they have a maiden name and then they have a married name. And sometimes they have a second married and a third married name. And often, especially in marriages, they marry under their former married name rather than their maiden name if they've been married before. And there's all those records out there that don't even give you a surname for the woman. And so you have all kinds of issues along with the issue of spelling. And I've had people that swear up and down the name has to be spelled this way because that's the way we spell it today. And it's really hard to explain that when you're working with a lot of people who are basically illiterate, it's hard to have a consistent spelling of any name. And so basing merges on names alone shouldn't be done. And really, I think most of the bad merges that are out there are based on merging records of people that just have names and no dates or places. You have a John Jones married to a Sarah Smith, and you see that combination, you say, oh, that's got to be my family. And you go merge them, even though one lived in England and one lived in North Carolina. And so you got to be really careful using just the name as your reference. Dates, they don't always agree. That's the thing that can drive us to distraction. I used to think that if you had more sources, you'd have more agreement. The opposite is usually the truth. The more records you have, the more variations on the dates you're going to get. And this could be from transcription errors, somebody guessing, or simply no date given, or the person didn't know the date. There's a lot of people in history that have no idea when they were born. And so they just make up dates, and sometimes they can't keep it straight. Dates need to be factored into the equation, though, because they can help separate similar people. But just because the dates aren't exactly right doesn't mean the people aren't the same people. That's the big thing you got to realize. One person could be having a date from a guess, and the other one from an incorrect record, and a third one from the correct record, and there'll be 3 different birth dates, but they're all the same person. And so you do have to realize that the dates are probably the wildest of the 4 things as far as looking for consistency and not finding it. Places. Again, places may or may not show in the record. Beware that political places, locations change with time. What was in Massachusetts in 1670 could be in Maine today. And so try to find multiple records if you can that list the place if possible. Don't rely on just one record because sometimes there's guesses involved. It's nice to try to have a set of records that might hopefully bring you some kind of consensus on where the person was from. And if parents are born and died, notice that, born and died in one location, and the child is born somewhere totally different, treat that with a grain of salt. If the parents were born and died in England and the child was born in North Carolina, think long and hard before you believe that. It could happen, but the odds are much against it. Okay, relationships. This can be usually your best guide. Try to look at the family as a whole, checking about the parents, the spouses, the children, the siblings, everybody in the family to help you get a feel for if this is really coming from the same family or not. Often other data is messed up, but the relationships, there'll be enough relationships there that you can tell that the 2 people are probably the same person. So if dates and places agree, but the people are totally different, there's probably a bad merge. And those are the kind of things I'm looking for a future lesson. When you have dates and places that agree, but the families are totally different, you know there's a problem. We'll see one of those tonight. Okay, so to review. When ready to merge 2 records, consider this: the names, the dates, the places, and the family members. Especially review those relationships. And then in addition, you can try looking in the records for previous reason statements that were given for either data or merge changes, the sources that are attached to the 2 records, discussions on the records of the 2 people, notes on the people. And then oftentimes we're finding a lot of people are starting to use the life sketch on the person's homepage to put in suggestions and ideas for people so that they know that there's a problem here. And my suggestion as far as merging goes is merge from the top down. In other words, if you've got a bunch of merge issues, start the farthest up the tree you need to go, like to say the parents. Clean the parents up before you even try to clean the kids up. Don't try the kids first and then the parents later. It'll be much harder to do that way. It's easier to work from the top down through the family if you have to do a bunch of different merges. So let's look at a simple merge. It's the family of David Hrobidge and Lydia Holmes. And you notice they have 16 children. I just show one of them. And so then I think that 16 is pretty generous. There's probably some mistakes in there. and he appears to have two duplicates. So I clicked on one of them, and you can see the possible duplicate popping up here. And so when I click on it, it turns out that it and the other one are just a single record sitting by itself. These records have no people connecting them. The dates agree, or they're almost identical to the David Trowbridge that's in my pedigree, is my ancestor. And so I went and looked at their change logs and showed that these two duplicates were originally connected to the wife and parents, but had their relationship broken. They were duplicates, and probably somebody didn't want to merge them in. So the simple way to avoid the problem was to just cut them out. And so this is a simple situation. Just merge them back in. You don't have to worry about what goes where, because it's just the person's name and their birth and death. And you can get them back into the tree. Later on, we're going to talk about orphaned ordinances. This would be an excellent example of how possibly a sealing of David and Lydia became orphaned and no longer was usable in tree because David was missing from the relationship, or Lydia was missing, depending on where the ordinance went. The ordinance needs to be with both of them. And when there was merges going on and they eliminated one of them by just tossing them out, that cuts the tie for the ordinance. It means the ordinance will show somewhere, but it's not going to have anybody connected to it. So it becomes what we call an orphaned ordinance. It needs people tied to it. And we'll talk about that at the very end. Okay, here's one that looks easy. I have another set of ancestors, John Abbott and Alice Berwick. And John was born in England. Alice was born in Ireland. They get married in Pennsylvania, which makes sense. They had both immigrated. And their kids are born here since they didn't marry till they came to America. That's important to realize. And these people are established and historically sound. We know the story fits and is correct from records. And then along comes a possible duplicate for Alice. And so we click on it, and it shows an Alice Berwick married to a John Abbott with a daughter, Elizabeth. Now, is this a duplicate record? Well, the Alice is born in Ireland and dies in Pennsylvania. The death date does differ, though. It's got a little different death date, but we don't worry so much about that. The birth dates agree because it says it's the right husband. So that's looking good. Alice has no information other than the connection to, or John has nothing about him other than his connection to Alice, which is kind of interesting because this looks like some kind of a family record of some kind, of christening or a birth record or something. And it would be strange to have all the information on the wife and not on the husband. And so we looked at the daughter Elizabeth, who would fit time-wise into this family, but she's born in Dorset, England. And so right there we start thinking this is not really a duplicate. It doesn't seem to be. And so really can't tell for sure at this point. So I thought, let's go look at the source that this comes from. So we go over here to Elizabeth, the daughter, and she has one source. And when we pull it up, sure enough, it's a christening record. In England, in Dorset, England, her father's a John Abbott and the mother is an Alice. Now remember, my John and Alice married an American, had children in Pennsylvania. And neither one of them were English. So it's not them. And so this record doesn't actually give the mother's maiden name either. It just says Alice. There's no birth and death information on Alice. It's just plain Alice. So what's happened here? Obviously, somebody wants to put this record in with John Abbott and Elizabeth Berwick. And so they went and changed the Alice record to make her Alice Berwick, who married John Abbott, and put dates in and all that stuff. This is really not a merge at all. So it needs to be marked as not a merge. And then I stripped out all the information about Alice Berwick from the Alice record and put it back to the way it was from the source. So all it had was Alice's name. It no longer had the bogus birth dates. It no longer had the bogus last name. And we just mark it not a match. And so this is where you go for not a match, is up in the merging tool, up at the very top. And like I said, I'd removed all of Alice's information from that duplicate record because it was obviously bogus. And then in the explanation, I wrote that out. I said, this record for merging comes from an infant christening of an Elizabeth Abbott of Dorset, England, and the names of the parents are John Abbott and Elizabeth. The Elizabeth in this record was edited to look like Elizabeth Berwick. Actually, it's Alice. I should have said that. It's Alice in this record was edited to look like Alice Berwick of Pennsylvania. It is not a match. Ooh, I made a boo-boo there. And then you click save. I'll have to find that someday and fix that. Okay, to Esther Burrows. My family just had all kinds of fun stuff in it when I went to write this. Another set of my ancestors. Esther's well established as the wife of William Bidgood and the daughter of Samuel Burrows and Hannah Roberts. They were Quakers in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. There's a birth record for a daughter, Anne, that names her parents William Bidgood and Esther, his wife. And so there's a duplicate there. Esther Burrow, without the S, but no, for names, an S, whether it's there or not, isn't necessarily a killer when it comes to whether we merge or not. There's actually two duplicates. The first one's Esther Burrow, the other one's Hannah. That's going to take a closer look. But let's start with the easier one, Esther. So I pulled Esther up to look at her, and she has one with the S, one without. The guessing for the year of birth is close, within a year. Same location. The one on the right with New Jersey, British Colonial America is the correct way to write it. The deaths, they're off. They have the same day, same year. The months are off. And that's probably due to the Quaker way of using the old calendar. And so we'd have to take a look at that. But I'm confident that those are really the same date. It's just one's written New Calendar way and one's written with Gregorian. Okay, so it's very, very close. That record on the left was brought over by FamilySearch in 2012. So that means it was a duplicate that was floating around in New FamilySearch. And so we just need to merge that in to clean it up and figure out for sure what the birth date or death date was. So when we're done, we now have the family looking like this. We have on the left the complete family, which I've cut off. There's actually more kids. And then the other wife, this Hannah, that's listed as a possible duplicate. Okay. These families have identically the same father. The father has the same exact records. I mean, it's not just a duplicate father. It is the same father. It's William. And the two Anns in these records, the only child on the right-hand side and the Ann on the left-hand side, are the exact same record again. And so something's gone on here with this mother's name. And who knows how come it's Hannah. But the nice thing about this particular one is Hannah has nothing on her. It's just her name. She has no birth, no death. She has no parents. She has the linkage to William and the linkage to Anne, but she's just basically a empty record. It has no temple work on it. And so because there's no temple work, I didn't feel bad at all to just merge her into Esther and just get rid of Hannah floating around and just turn her into Esther, because that's got to be what was going on. Okay, now this is really important. When you're doing the merge, you're going to see situations like this where you have William over here with the record D22 and the William over here with D22. And the temptation is, I don't need to click replace and move it over there, but you do need to. You need to do it with the daughter, even though it's the same record here, same record there. And you know they're the same record too, because they're directly across from each other. Now, why do we have to click replace? We need to click replace because if there's a sealing ordinance for Anne to William and his wife, or William to his wife, and you don't bring them over in the replace, you will orphan that ordinance. And we'll show you what that looks like a little bit later. Always, the basic rule is this: when there are people in there that really exist, move them over. If they really exist and they're part of the family, just move them over and don't worry about them. Now, this one does come with a problem. That is, when we move William over here, it's going to erase all those copies of the marriage date in place. That's the one thing about FamilySearch I don't like, but they haven't figured out a way to save that when they move it over. So if I do this replace, I should write down 5 February 1733, Monmouth, New Jersey, British colonial America, so that I can go back in after the merge and re-add the marriage date in place, because it's going to erase all of them. And so that's the only place where there's a real drawback in these merges. That one thing does destroy the marriages that are showing in the remaining record. Okay, so here's another one. William Levering and Elizabeth Shoemaker. Okay, William and his wife are my 6th great-grandparents, and I ran across this because I played with Bazilla and said, show me any place where there's some possible duplicates, and up popped this family. And I looked at it and thought, well, okay, let's see, everything looks pretty good right now. The wife's name, I know her as Anna Catherine, and this is Elizabeth Catherine, so there's a little variation there. But then I noticed something really big. William has no parents, and William is well documented for at least 2 more generations back. So there really is something missing. Who are the parents? Well, there's a duplicate, William Levering Sr. And so you need to identify if this can be a good merge or not. So when we pull them up, we notice that the dates are almost identical, 2 years difference in the dates. And the interesting thing was the duplicate that showed as a possible duplicate was put in the surviving person column. That's because FamilySearch feels that that's the more complete record. Okay. And so the births don't match quite. The years are off a little bit. And now the record that shows as a duplicate actually has the correct birth date. Going back into my records, I realized that the 1679 is really the correct year. So we'll have to move that over, replace it when we get to the actual merge. But you can see the deaths are pretty much in agreement, burials in agreement. Very little variations in case you're curious. Roxborough is a suburb of Philadelphia in those days, and today it's practically downtown Philadelphia. Okay, so one more thing. The husband and the wife and the child William in this family were all Green Temple people. In other words, they were new records. And the corresponding people on the left record were done 50 years ago. And so it appears that the duplicates were recently made and they're going to need to be merged in. So I have not just the husband issue, but I have the wife and at least two of the kids, or one of the kids, who are all duplicate records that are going to need to be merged. These spouses don't agree. They're not the same record. And I'm going to have to decide what to do about the name, assuming they're the same person. And they have different death dates. They have the same birth year. And then the first child, William, is the other problem. There's two records for him. The dates agree, so they're most likely really him. He's my ancestor, so he needs to be fixed. But we won't fix him till we fix mom. And then the last four children in that record on the left are identical to four of the children on the right. So there'll be no problem when we finish the merge. And there was another marriage here, and Catherine has a marriage to no spouse with a son, Benjamin Shoemaker. I have no idea what to do with him. And so the best thing to do when you have no idea is just leave it alone. And then William's parents are down at the bottom. And once we do the merge, then basically we're going to have the family all together. So when it's time to do this merge, I can put in there that they're basically the same person. The birth date was exactly 2 years apart, and the 1679 year was the correct one. And that's why I brought it over, and you see it on the right-hand side with the dots around it, meaning that I had replaced what was in the right record with this information from the left record, from the duplicate. And then, of course, I had to go down through the family and bring people over that needed to be brought over. And when I'm finished, I click Finish Merge. And now it looks pretty good. The process moving forward, William Sr. is solved. He's resolved. He's got parents now. Now we need to merge the two wives, but I had to do some research, decide if the lady's name is Elizabeth Catherine or Anna Catherine. And then last of all, we need to merge the two Williams, which are very likely duplicates. And the family will be all cleared up. But it's kind of like dominoes. You clear up one, and then you find you've got another one. You clear that up, then you find you've got something else. But try to keep working from the top down, one at a time, and be methodical about it, and it's not hard. Okay, and what am I going to do with that last one? William married to no woman with a child, Benjamin Shoemaker. I'm just going to leave it and let it sit there and let somebody else figure out what's going on. I don't know enough about the Shoemaker family to know if there's really a Benjamin. If he really existed, he probably married and has a family, but I never was able to identify him. Okay, now fairly recently, within the last year or so, they've started trying to help us because I guess so many people didn't give any reason statement whatsoever. by putting in these canned suggested reason statements. You can say that all the vital information and relationships match. They even give you the IDs of the two people you're merging. You click add, it goes up in the reason statement. Or you could say most of the vital information and relationships match. Details contain minor conflicts, click add. Or most information and relationships match. No details conflict, click add. Or this reason contains little information. This record contains little information. There's enough evidence to believe it's the same person. Click add. Now, notice what I said here. Don't do just that. Add to it with anything you feel is important in that box. You can put a lot of stuff in there. The more specific you are, the better you're going to help other people. Don't just give the canned one, but put something in. Don't just do the merge and click finish and never fill that in. And when you do use those, remember to click the add button to get them put up there. And this is what it would look like. And then you can add to that whatever you want. Okay, when not to merge. This is something that should be addressed every time you approach a merge. Does this situation fit or not fit the criteria for a merge? Well, you can look at the relationships. Those are vital, but they don't always tell the whole story. People with the same name can live in different parts of the world. We've talked about that. Name variations may mean something, or they just might be a natural variation. Locations can be a key factor. You often have to look at the various people attached to a possible duplicate to see everybody's dates and places. And lastly, the messed up record. This is the record that already shows signs of having been messed up in previous merges. This is a record they're saying is a possible duplicate that might have 25 or more kids with multiple spouses and children born in the different families at the same time, but obviously not a polygamy family. It's best to hold off on those rather than create yet another merge which muddies the water even more. Because that's a record that probably should be cleaned up before you do any merges. Okay, so here's an example. I have Anna Maria, who's married to Johannes Fischer. And it says that she has a duplicate, Maria Elizabeth Schmidt. So our first names don't even match. And the Maria Elizabeth has a birth date. FamilySearch says these two are matches. Okay, I have Anna Maria in my pedigree. Don't know much about her. They're saying she matches with this Maria Elizabeth Schmidt. From the details on the two women, the merge doesn't really look like it, but there's not a lot to go on. I don't have any information on Anna Maria. This Maria Elizabetha has information. She was born, I'll take that back. I believe she's my actual ancestor. She's born in the Rhine, and she was christened in the Palatinate and then died in Pennsylvania, which is where my German families came. So if we go looking a little deeper, they really don't seem like the same family. The Maria Elizabetha Fischer is Fisher, and the other gal, Mary Elizabeth Fischel, is Fischel because she's married to a guy whose last name is Fischel. So there's a little similarity, but those names are really different names. And then the Fischer is from Bern, and Fischel is from Rhineland or Hesse. So they're not in the same part of Germany. And so they really aren't matching people. They're similar. The husbands are both Johannes. The last names are kind of close. The time periods apparently close, but the locations are totally different. The families are different. And so this is one you would go through and mark, not a match. These are the things you look for as you try to decide. So you say, not a match. I say, these women are not the same person. One married Fisher, another official. One was in Barron, the other one was in Hess. And then click Save. Here's another one, should we merge? Now, I show you the family in My Roots Magic, just so you can see what it looks like. It's always been a confusing family because it's a Jackson and a Johnson. And these are back in early United States or early American history. They're both fairly well documented. The father, Thomas Jackson, got land from his parents, so we know who his parents are. And his wife received land from her father, so we know who her parents are. The children that are shown here were all left in a will that Thomas Jackson wrote. So everybody is established from records, even though we don't have a lot of specific dates and things like that. The ordinances, these were all done many moons ago. And so the temple work should be done for these people and should be showing. So what do we have when I go to that family now? All I get is Thomas Jackson and Hannah Johnson and one child. And this Thomas Jackson record is a newly created record. It's not the original one. It needs temple work. And it has no parents associated. It only has one child. Okay. And under research help, we see the famous 2 duplicates. So what happens here? I pulled up the 3 records. They all show a marriage to the exact same Hannah Jackson record. So that Hannah Johnson is the exact same record. We don't have to merge her. We have to figure out what to do about these husbands named Thomas. The top one's the one in my pedigree. It's a new record. It needs ordinances, and it only has one child, Joseph. The second Thomas is the original record. How do I know that? It's got those early temple ordinances on it. It also has 9 children, which is, I think, one more than it should have. But at least it's got the family. And then the bottom one, I guess the bottom one's the actual one that's in my tree. It needs ordinances. So the first one and the third one both need ordinances and only has one child, Hannah, the child I go through. That's why I was able to see it in my pedigree. And then he's also the second, she's also, this Hannah is also in the second family. So Hannah, the child number 3, is also found in family number 2. And the Joseph up in family 1 is also found down in the family of number 2. So we've got three records here to merge. So it's not really a hard thing. It's just a matter of what order should I do. And one of the things I want to do, you'll notice there's 2 marriage record dates. One says 1647. One says 1663. Whoops. The 1647 can't be. If that was the case, this couple married when they were 6 and 7 years old. That's not going to work. The 1663 works with the ages of the children. So in the end, I'm going to want this marriage record to show. And so actually the best thing to do is I'm going to take the 2 records that don't have the good marriage date on, and I'm going to merge them together first. I'm going to merge Thomas number 1 with Thomas number 3. That way we eliminate one of the wrong records. Then I'll merge into the one that remains. It doesn't matter which one of these two I pick to remain. Let's say number 1's the one that remains. I will then merge number 2 into number 1, which means I got to bring all the children over. But the main thing is when I bring Thomas over from this record, it's going to bring over the date here that I want. And I won't have to write it down and copy it and then put it in by hand. That's just a way to save a little work. They're all going to get merged so I can pick the order I want to do them. And it really doesn't make much difference, just a convenience for me. Okay, so the end result, everything looks pretty good. Well, yeah, but the family's got at least a couple of kids that are duplicates and 1 or 2 extra kids, so they're going to have to be worked on. But the basic family now is looking so much better. Thomas has parents. The kids are all together. The family with the old ordinances are showing. It makes things a lot nicer. Now, this orphaned ordinance thing, talked about it several times. This is what you'll see when you go to a record where there's an orphaned ordinance. This person essentially is showing 2 sets of sealing records. A sealing that was done back in 1920 in Salt Lake to no parents, and a sealing done in 2013 to Joseph Chandler and Sarah Abbott, which are this person's parents. So what's obviously happened is somebody was merging a Joseph Chandler record or a Sarah Abbott record. I don't know which. And of course, it had the husband with it. So if they were merging Josephs, they had to merge the 2 Josephs. Then the question became, well, what about the Sarah? Do I bring her over? And they looked over on the right and they said, no, there's already a Sarah over there. I don't need to bring her over. Well, the trouble was the one they didn't bring over was the one that had the sealing attached to it. So now, as we get everything merged together, Joseph's got a sealing record that has no wife attached to it. So, or parent attached to it. It's got one of the parents missing, probably the father. And so it can't show who the parents are. So that's an ordinance. It's a valid ordinance, but we need to go hunting to see who's missing, who didn't get brought over. There's a record for either the mother or the father out there. This still needs to be merged into this mother and father. Once they're merged back in, that will then change to being the effective ordinance. It's just kind of a cleanup thing we need to do. The Lord knows it was done in 1920, but the system is saying we don't get it. We're totally lost. This is why we always bring over the spouses, the duplicate spouses, the duplicate parents, and duplicate children. Because if you don't, you start breaking these ceilings and you get these messed up ceilings like this. Okay, I hope I haven't put you to sleep. Let me stop sharing. And I'll stop the recording.